Marcos hadn't slept properly in 3 years. Not since the day the doctors told him his daughter had a rare illness. Since then, life had become a cycle of hospital visits, overnight shifts, unpaid bills, and pretending he was stronger than he felt. He worked 2 jobs, slept whenever exhaustion finally won, and came home to a house that had forgotten how to laugh. Every morning, he told himself to keep going. Every night he wondered how much longer he could. One evening, after finishing another late shift, Marcus sat alone in his car outside his apartment. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel and cried. Not the quiet tears he could wipe away before walking inside, the kind he'd been holding back for years. When the tears finally slowed, he picked up his phone. He stared at Deon's name for a long moment. They hadn't spoken in years. No bitter fight, no falling out. Just the quiet distance that grows when life gets hard and you stop reaching. He breathed in before pressing call. Deon answered on the second ring. For nearly an hour they talked about their mum, about Marcus's daughter. Marcus wasn't even sure what he needed to say. He just needed someone to hear how heavy life had become. And Deon listened. He never interrupted. He simply stayed on the line. Eventually, Marcus glanced at the time. "I've got to go. Another shift," he said. "Okay," Deon replied. "Take care of yourself." The next evening, there was a knock at the door. Marcus opened it and froze. Deon stood on the porch with a worn duffel bag over his shoulder. "I flew in this afternoon," he said with a small smile. "I figured you could use some company." That night, they didn't talk about hospital reports or overdue bills. They sat on the porch, cracked open 2 beers, watched the sun disappear behind the houses, and simply shared the silence. Nothing had been fixed. Marcus's daughter was still fighting. Tomorrow would still be hard. But for the first time in years, Marcus wasn't carrying it alone. "You're coming to Hawaii with us for the graduation trip, right?" Tommy smiled. "I wish, but I can't." His friends looked at him. "Business hasn't been good at my parents' pizzeria. Some days, we're lucky to get 5 customers. I don't want them spending money on my trip. I'd rather get a part-time job, earn some money, and help them out." Everyone fell silent. No one knew what to say. But after school that day, when Tommy wasn't around, his friends came up with an idea. A few days later, customers started pouring into the pizzeria. By lunchtime, every table was taken. The next day, there was a line outside the door. While clearing a table, Tommy noticed a flyer on the table. It showed a photo of a pizza, the restaurant's name and address, and one sentence: "A family pizzeria worth discovering." Curious, Tommy asked a customer where they got it. The customer replied, "Oh, some kids were handing these out around town." Tommy didn't need to ask who. Within 2 weeks, every evening felt like Friday night. The once empty pizzeria was now filled with laughter, conversations, and the smell of fresh pizza. One evening, Tommy's mother handed him an envelope. "This should be enough for Hawaii." Tommy looked inside and immediately shook his head. "Mom, I can't take this." "We can't afford it." She smiled and looked around the restaurant. "A few weeks ago, we couldn't. Now this place finally has a chance. Go make those memories with your friends before the next chapter of your life begins." Tommy smiled, took out his phone and made a call. "Hey guys, Guess what? I'm coming to Hawaii. At your age, you should be building your life, not wearing out your shoes. Daniel looked down at his worn sneakers. One of the soles had been stitched back together with thick, black thread. He couldn't help but laugh. The man who said it was a regular named Benjamin. Every other evening, he came in for soup. Some days, he finished it. Some days, he barely touched it. Over the months, he and Daniel became friends. Benjamin had learned that Daniel walked an hour to work and another hour home every day because he couldn't afford a car. Whenever Benjamin came in, he'd ask, "Still walking?" Daniel would smile, "Still walking." Then one afternoon, a woman walked into the restaurant carrying a brown envelope. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Daniel." "That's me." She gave him a gentle smile. "I'm Benjamin's sister. My brother asked me to give this to you." Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a car key. He looked up, confused. She smiled, sadly. "Benjamin passed away last week. He wanted you to have his car." Daniel looked down at the key in his hand. There was also a handwritten note.
"Daniel, I spent months wishing medicine could give me more miles. It couldn't. But maybe the miles I have left don't have to end with me. I hope this old car gives you back a little time, so you can spend more of it building the life that's waiting for you. Benjamin."
Daniel walked outside. Across the street sat Benjamin's old 15-year-old blue sedan. The next morning, as Daniel drove to work, he couldn't stop thinking about Benjamin. Every mile on the road felt like a gift from a man who wished he'd had more of them. Every night after the university library closed, there was still one student sitting on its front steps. Maya was one of the brightest students on campus, but her family could barely pay the bills. They couldn't afford home internet or a laptop, so every night she sat on the concrete steps outside the library, borrowing its free Wi-Fi and typing her essays with 2 thumbs on a cracked phone screen. The head librarian, Mrs. Gable, noticed Maya because she was always incredibly polite. Before the doors locked each night, Maya quietly pushed in chairs, helped stack books, and thanked every staff member before leaving. Night after night, Mrs. Gable watched Maya studying outside as the weather grew colder. Even when the wind howled across campus or temperatures dropped close to freezing, Maya was always there, determined to finish one more assignment before walking home. One stormy evening, as heavy rain began to pour, Mrs. Gable walked outside. Instead of telling Maya to leave, she handed her a special after-hours access card and a box. Inside the box was a refurbished laptop, a portable Wi-Fi hotspot with several months of prepaid internet service, and a handwritten letter. It read, "Every member of the library staff contributed what they could. Some gave a little, some gave more, but all of us agreed on one thing. Your determination deserves a fair chance." Mrs. Gable smiled. "You've spent enough nights studying outside." She pointed toward the warm lights inside the library. "From now on, study inside." Then she added softly, "Dreams shouldn't depend on the weather." Years later, when Maya graduated at the top of her class, she returned to that same library as its newest librarian. Whenever she looked through the front windows on cold winter nights, she always checked the steps outside. She opened the door to find a police officer standing beside her father. "We found him, sitting alone in the park," the officer said gently. "He had your address on this card." "Thank you," she whispered. Her father stepped inside, his eyes wandering across the familiar walls as if he'd never seen them before. After a long silence, he turned to her. "Where am I?" She swallowed. "Home." He frowned. "And who are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and quietly made him a sandwich. When she placed it in front of him, she finally spoke. "Dad, eat your dinner." He looked toward the front door, then back at her. "I should go," he murmured. "My wife is waiting for me. We always have dinner together on Thursdays." Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. "Mom passed away 12 years ago." He searched her face, but found nothing. "I don't remember." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady herself. "We've been looking for you all day, Dad." That night, after helping him into bed, she returned carrying an old, worn novel. He smiled, faintly. "Are you going to read to me?" She nodded, opened the book, and began reading. Before the chapter ended, he had fallen asleep. She brushed a strand of grey hair from his forehead and gently tucked the blanket around him. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "When I was little, you never let me fall asleep without a story." "Good night, Dad."